Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Abha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Rananda Padajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Nandana Padajana Ranjana Yamana Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar that is Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar that is Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavin ki Jai Dhamacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 9th day of December, 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're at the bottom of page 211. We're in chapter 4, titled Transcendental Knowledge, text number 25. Got it? Daivame vapare yagyam yogina payupasate brahmagnab apade yagyam yagyena vopajuvati Daivame vapare yagyam yoginak payupasate brahmagnab apade yagyam yagyenaivopajuvati Daivame vapare yagyam yoginak payupasate brahmagnavapade yagyam yagyenaivopajuvati Daivamevapade yagyam yoginak payupasate brahmagnavapade yagyam yagyenaivopajuvati. Were the words Daivam, in worshipping the demigods, eva, like this, apade, some others, yagyam, sacrifices. Yogina, mystics, payupasate, worship perfectly. Brahma, of the absolute truth, agnau, in the fire, apade, others, yagyam, sacrifice, yagena, by sacrifice, eva, thus, upajuvati, offer. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factually, sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is also known as Yajna. We're in the middle of page 212. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely, sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods such as Indra, the sun god, etc. And others who are impersonalists sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bhav Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others who worship the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire and thus end their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such impersonalists sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the food of workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifices his material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna-conscious person, like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions as well as his own self, everything, is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus he is the first-class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So now we are going to hear a list of different kinds of aspirants, some of them material, some of them more or less spiritual, who are sacrificing. They're sacrificing their hearing process, they're sacrificing their wealth, all kinds of sacrifices. And when I read this part of the Bhagavad Gita, I always think of the previous chapter in text number 9, which says, Yagyartat kamano niyatra lokoyam karma bandhana taratam kamakonteya mukta sangha samachara, which says that any work we do has to be performed as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Otherwise, that work which is not a sacrifice will bind us to this material world. So that's the basic principle of sacrifice. But we can see that there are different motives. I mean, the gross materialists are sacrificing like anything. You know, if you want to be a conventional success in the modern American world. Okay? You have to get a college education. All right? I mean, there's like a big divide. Those who have a degree of some kind can get better jobs, and those who without degree, it's very difficult. So so you got to sacrifice. So that there's a lot of time involved, and chances are you're going to go into debt. I mean, trying to pay off debt, serious debt, is a big sacrifice. And at the end, you get your degree and you get some kind of job, hopefully, that at least you can be paying off some of that debt. And even in your job, there's so much sacrifice you have to do so that you can get that paycheck, so you can live in the world and somehow eke out some happiness. So everyone's performing sacrifice. Then that's its material sacrifice. But then there's various grades of transcendentalists. There's the impersonalists who are trying to sacrifice their own individuality and their own personal identity, hoping that they'll get to that point of freedom from birth and death and liberation, mukti. And there are the yogis who really sacrifice, going alone, into the Himalayas, practicing all those those severe yogic practices. And many of them have material desires, especially when you start to get some of those powers. You can imagine, how alluring they can be. Fly anywhere and create a universe, or, it's unbelievable. So, sacrifice is going on all over, but what do you sacrifice for? As always, your motivation, your goal is the key. And that's why this is transcendental knowledge. We have to know who we actually are. We have to know who the Supreme is. We have to know what the goal of life is. And we have to know the method to get it. Everything is based on knowledge. So that's why it's called transcendental knowledge. And on the basis of that, when we perform Sankirtan Yajna, what's the motive? To please Krishna. We get love of God. Right? And when you think about it, what does love of God mean? It means that you're so enthralled with that Supreme Personality that you want to do everything in your power to please Him, to make Him happy, to establish and maintain that relationship with Him. So that's really the epitome of sacrifice. You're sacrificing all of your material propensities, your time, your energy, your possessions, everything, and the reward is beyond anything that these other sacrifices can imagine. Because if you're sacrificing for something material, then you've really wasted your time. Because that desire, and that if suppose you get it, then that desire to enjoy such a thing or relish it or just to have it is going to keep you bound to this world. Eventually, the body falls, but what's left is that ardent desire that you cultivated by this hard sacrifice. Mostly people sacrifice, for a family. I mean, the standard thing when I was growing up, you had your nuclear family or larger family, and the father would work like crazy, and the mother would work like crazy at home, taking care of the kids and doing so many things. For the children, you sacrifice for the children. But that's material. It keeps you bound up. It's ultimately frustrating. But the principle of yajna is all important. And Prabhupada explains, I think it's in that purport to that verse I quoted from the 3rd chapter, that the very word yajna means sacrifice and also Vishnu. That's meaning that whatever sacrifice you do, it should be done for establishing and maintaining your relationship, your latent relationship with Krishna and Vishnu. So that's what we're taught in these pages of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, should we go on? All right, text 26. Shotradin indriyanyanye sangyamagna shujuvati shabdadin vishayananya indriyagna shujuvati. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. And others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the object of the senses in the fire of the senses. So we're going to hear about all kinds of fires, I believe. Yeah. Some that you sacrifice things, just like we have our little fire sacrifice. You throw the grains in the ghee. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, okay. We read that, right? Purport. The members of the 4 divisions of human life, namely the brahmachari, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi, are all meant to become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification, like the animals, the 4 orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis, or students under the care of a bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Harir Nama Anukirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Similarly, the householders who have some license for sense gratification perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies of human society. But a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratification. Marriage on the principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society, because that is the way for restricted sex life. This restricted, unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna, because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency towards sense gratification for higher transcendental life. So, there are all kinds of fire, just like it's described, the brahmachari. Now, it's a great opportunity, really, brahmachari life, to not be entangled. You can see how you get entangled means that, entanglement means it's like you're in a net, you don't expect it, and suddenly you're stuck. And to be a responsible person and not commit great offense, and then you have to follow through with that. If you get married, and a child comes, well, then that's years of your life. That's part of it, raising the child. Now, there are all kinds of Krishna conscious ways to do that, but it becomes more difficult. You're navigating a longer course with so many pitfalls. You don't have the wonderful peer pressure and environment that the brahmacharya ashram gives you. Even though, in one sense it's like inconceivable, how could you do anything like that, But actually, if you do it properly, you realize it's a great advantage. It's a great advantage, and fortunate to be able to sustain that, And Prabhupada said, if possible, stay brahmachari. But each category of society has its proper sacrifice to perform. In the Vedic culture, we have the varnas and the ashrams, and there's a program for progressive purification and advancement in every stage of life. So that's in itself a sacrifice, is to restrain the natural tendency of the senses and the mind to seek out sense gratification. But knowing the philosophy and being serious about chanting, which gives you the spiritual strength to actually act on what you know, then you can sacrifice all of that so-called pleasure for the higher purpose of regaining our nature, our original nature. Nitya, Prabhupada is always quoting this verse, Nitya siddha Krishna prem sadhyaka bonoi shavanadi shuddha chitte karaye udoi. This is Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Sanatana Goswami, I believe. This eternal perfection, Nitya siddha Krishna prem, of love of Krishna, is not something artificial that we try to create or develop. It's intrinsic to every living being. Nitya siddha sadhya kamanoi is always there. Shavanadi shuddha chitte, by purification of the chitta, of the consciousness, beginning with and chiefly through the process of hearing. Shavana adi means hearing, etc. Next, etc. is chanting. And then from there follow all the remaining 7 processes of devotional service. Shavanadi shuddha chitte kadaye udoi. That latent love of God, it awakens. It's in there already. And we're experiencing it in a distorted way, probably say perverted way. All this kama and this desire and falling in love, and all of this stuff is just a distortion of that. But really, to experience the original and pure love for God, is the goal of all human life or any life. But only in human life can it be achieved. So the Bhagavad Gita, although there are many other things that he's dealing with here, ultimately comes to that point. And here it's very, we can relate to Shabdadin, the sacrifices, hearing. Hearing so many other things. And this is one of the great advantages of the old brahmacharya ashram before all this electronics were going on. When I came, I don't even know if we had Walkmans in 1973. I think they had a Walkman. Not yet. Huh? The history. But I mean, there were recordings. I think there were cassettes. Anyway, but it wasn't. It was like you were in a protected bubble there. I don't even know if I saw a newspaper for a year or something. It's like. But in one sense, you can say, "Wow, what a sacrifice!" But the thing is, out of sight, out of mind. Having all of these other wonderful vibrations. I was in a temple where there was a lot of good kirtan leaders. It was really happening in New York, and LA is the other one. And so all these, the kirtans and the Prabhupada's voice always throughout the halls. You're hearing constantly, and I didn't feel like I was missing out. First of all, I was very unusual. I wasn't really into rock music. Hello, from the 60s, I didn't listen to that. And so we were in a household where it was either folk music or classical music. And that was basically it. Anyway, even that has to be given up, But hearing, I remember some experiences, they stick out in your mind, So we had so many devotees in that little temple that every morning we'd have a little maha cleanup. Your area of responsibility may just be the stairs, or this part of the kitchen or something, because there are like 50 of us or 60. So that for some days, I didn't think I did it that long. My responsibility was just mopping the temple. Temple was maybe a little more than half as big as this. It was definitely smaller. And mopping meant you get down on all fours and we had a bucket, and you're by hand, you're just... and the curtains are open. There's the Radha Govinda. You've seen some pictures of them, beautiful. And the Govindam's recording had just come out. And now we wouldn't play the Govindam recording, which we play, But there's other things on that record. And, Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya, Yamuna singing. So I remember hearing that song playing in the temple room, and I'm mopping, and, and there's Radha Govinda. And I said, "Wait, I'm in heaven." I was like, there was nothing. I didn't feel I was missing out on anything. Anyway, so but he stresses here the hearing, because the sound vibration is the most powerful thing, obviously. If we can always be hearing and vibrating this transcendental sound, we make very quick advancement. So we have to renounce the other sounds. All right, text 27. Sarvan indriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma sangyam yogagnau juvati jnana dipite. Others, who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses, offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Sounds like the yogis. Purport: the yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyagatma and Paragatma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Paragatma. But as soon as the same soul becomes detached from such sense enjoyment, it is called Pratyagatma. The soul is subjected to the functions of the 10 kinds of air at work within the body. And this is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjali system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner, so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to this yoga system, Pratyagatma is the ultimate goal. This Pratyagatma is withdrawn from activities in matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, eyes for seeing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, and hand for touching, and all of them are thus engaged in activities outside the self. They are called the functions of the Pranavayu. The Apanavayu goes downwards. Vyanavayu acts to shrink and expand. Samanavayu adjusts equilibrium. Udanavayu goes upwards. And when one is enlightened, one engages all these in searching for self-realization. So aren't you glad we don't have to worry about all that? Yeah. Who's deaf? It's very hard. There's one verse, I forget the Sanskrit. It's all about the holy name. And it says it's very easy, for everybody, except those who are deaf and dumb. A lot of times people who are deaf, they can't speak properly because they didn't, It's very hard because the sound is so essential. It's really a crippling factor. I mean, nothing is impossible with determination, since there's so many, what do they call that? Sign language. But it's very, very difficult, because the very power of the sound of the holy name, is so important, so foundational for our movement, for our development, our maintenance in Krishna consciousness. To not have that, it's just inconceivable. So it's difficult, but if someone is really eager, they can read, and they can also get the sign language, and so if they have the proper association, they can make some advancement anyway. But here you can see, oh boy, Patanjali system. It's like, chapter 6, when you get to chapter 6. And it's just, once you get exposed, you can read that book by Radhanath Swami, about how his experience, he was really a heroic figure, going overland to India, and that whole experience, how he was stopped at the border, didn't have it, and somehow he made it in, and he actually became a real yogi, But it's significant that, he gave it up. He gave it up, came down, hung out in Vrindavan, eventually met the devotees there, met Prabhupada there, So, but it's a, I can't say I tried it, I was just dabbling in meditation and so forth, a little pranayama and stuff. It was very helpful for health, that's for sure. It helped me to regain my health, so I think. But mostly what it did, great value, was that it put me into the yoga culture. And so there's so many books here and there, and eventually I got one of Prabhupada's books and became attracted to Krishna, And it also, I was able to take up the chanting. Amazingly, even, the chanting of Hare Krishna, starting from another group. They were emphasizing that mantra as one of the mantras you could pick to chant, and then, maybe previous life or something, I picked the Hare Krishna mantra. And just, trying to meditate on the Hare Krishna mantra, it was, of course I had all kinds of, anarthas, but it was strong enough to make me really interested in who this Krishna was, and where are you going to go but the Krishna temple to find that out. So, but Krishna is going through these different things, and they're all bona fide systems, but they're really not practical in this age for the vast majority of people. And if you want a mass movement that's going to go worldwide, it has to be something that you can practice, even on a rudimentary level, even from the position of gross imperfection and impurity, because that's what you've got. That's what the best people have. So that's what Lord Chaitanya's movement is. No hard and fast rules for chanting. Anyone can take part, and as soon as you begin to take part, if you're somewhat sincere and you just listen, purification takes place, and you're getting attracted to Krishna. And that attraction to Krishna is the gold standard, even if it's just the beginning. And Krishna sees from within your heart. Oh, this person, at least for a few moments, is sincerely chanting my name. And so he's, as he says right in the Bhagavad Gita, he starts purifying from within the heart and arranging things so that you can become more attracted. Anyway, so that's But it's good to know these different things. And notice there's all these fires. The Atma Sangame Yoga now, things are being burned up. That means that purification is taking place. But there's nothing like the fire of Krishna consciousness, quick purification. Okay, text 28, more Jagya. Dravida Dasa Yagya Yoga Yagyasta Tapare Svadhyaya Jnana Yagyascha Yatayak Sanshita Vrataha. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Purport. These sacrifices may be fitted into various divisions. There are persons who are sacrificing their possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. In India, the rich mercantile community or princely order open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Annacheta, Atitishala, Anathalaya, and Vidyapit. In other countries, too, there are many hospitals, old age homes, and similar charitable foundations meant for distributing food, education, and medical treatment free to the poor. All these charitable activities are called Dravya Maya Yagya. There are others who, Dravya simply means things, consisting of things, basically. There are others who, for higher elevation in life or for promotion to higher planets within this universe, voluntarily accept many kinds of austerities, such as Chandrayana and Chaturmasya. Well, that sounds familiar. These processes entail severe vows for conducting life under certain rigid rules. For example, under the Chaturmasya vow, the candidate does not shave for 4 months during the year, July to October. He does not eat certain foods, does not eat twice in a day, or does not leave home. Such sacrifice of the comforts of life is called Tapomaya Jagya. There are still others who engage themselves in different kinds of mystic yogas, like the Patanjali system, for merging into the existence of the Absolute, or the Hatha Yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, for particular perfections. And some travel to all sanctified places of pilgrimage. All these practices are called Yoga Yagya, sacrifice for a certain type of perfection in the material world. There are others who engage themselves in the studies of different Vedic literatures, specifically the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras, or the Sankhya philosophy. All of these are called Svadhyaya Yagya, or engagement in the sacrifice of studies. All these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above-mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. So the point is that, Hare Krishna Prabhu, is that even within all these different realms of sacrifice, there's gross and subtle material attachments. I mean, how many times have we heard how the yogis often get entangled in their siddhis, right? Their powers. And we have so many examples in the Bhagavatam of yogis who are anything but transcendentalists. They're extremely proud of their yogic attainments. The famous, was it Durvasa Muni, who challenged Ambarish and was soundly disciplined, by Narayan in the form of his chakra and so forth. And there are many others, Saubhari Muni and others, because you can just imagine it, I mean, it's hard to imagine doing some of these austerities. I mean, living underwater, that seems like to be a thing that you can just develop the ability to live underwater. Saubhari Muni was living within the Yamuna for years and years and years and years. And assumedly he was, aiming, he wasn't a devotee, even as in the Yamuna, he was establishing some kind of powers. He had certain powers. And he had to relate to somebody, so he had made friends with the fish. Garuda comes and eats the big fish, and he gets all upset and curses Garuda. And eventually he sees a fish, two fish copulating, and he can't control the senses. So it comes out. You can imagine, if you stay in the bath too long, you get all wrinkly. And so he's all wrinkled up, But he wanted to get married. So he found some king or something, had many daughters. And he asked for one of his daughters as for marriage, and so he was saying, oh boy, they're not going to want to marry this guy, he's old and wrinkly. And so he said, yes, any one of them can pick you, So he realized, oh boy, it's going to be hard. So he turns himself, his yogic powers, into a very handsome, So they all wanted to marry him. So now he's got all these wives, he gets entangled, all these children, and he says, oh boy, what have I done? I was so happy underneath the water there now. So what did it all come to? In other words, the principle in Krishna consciousness is that we have, as human beings, we have the tendency to strive to want to gain something, and it's usually something material. It may be grossly material, or it may be subtle material things, subtle powers, the siddhis, whatever. Even liberation can be a kama, a sense of kama, siddhi, a mukti kama. So, without the right knowledge and the right association, we're inevitably going to get deviated in what we think is important, and it's going to be just another variety of matter. It looks like it's revolutionary, like it's something completely different, but it's really not. It's just a subtle form of matter. You're indulging in your pride and lording it over material energy in a certain form, and so getting the knowledge from Krishna through his disciplic succession. And the importance of the Guru Prabhupada's, giving it, is that he's giving it in a way that we can understand. And also it's important to have contemporary people who can explain it. Because Prabhupada is also, all of these different Dravimaya Yagya, there's so much Sanskrit and so many concepts that are strange. So, but the wonderful thing is it all resolves itself. It all resolves if you take part in Krishna consciousness. Because as you read Krishna book, you read any of Prabhupada's books, Bhagavatam as a whole, it's coming to the point that when someone comes to, before Krishna, or Krishna comes before someone, and they have a whole transformation of their consciousness, and with so many examples where they say, "Oh, this is really what I was striving for. This is what the perfect example is Dhruva Maharaj," and it's a standard trope. You start out with a material desire, and so many people, they come to Krishna. The Krishna says, "You're troubled. You want some wealth. Some peace somehow or other. If you go to Krishna for that, that's auspicious. Then you're Sukriti." But among those, and we're back again to knowledge, which is the title of this chapter, that of all those four, is Chaturvada Bhajantamam Jana Sukritanor Jana, Arto, Jigyasur, Artharti, Gyanicha Bhadatarshaba. There's the troubled souls, those who are in, they need some help for some problem. That's fine. They're going to Krishna. Artharti, they want some wealth. They're curious, or they're really in knowledge. In other words, they know this is what they want to learn about Krishna consciousness. Oh, these are the best. They're all glorious, but these are like my very self. And then he locks it in. He says, after many, many births, bahunam jamanamante gyanavan mam papadyate, of cultivating knowledge, those who are truly in knowledge, what do, Bhakti Alex? They render unto me, knowing Vasudeva, myself, to be everything. So obviously that's the end of the search, And so all of these different things Krishna's describing, they're all like eightfold mysticism, and these are all ways in which you can advance in this world. But there's always an element of material selfishness about it, but not in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is pure because the ultimate motive, the one that's exalted, the one that you're striving for, is complete selflessness. And it's paradoxical because we want to reach the stage of unending and unimaginable bliss. And, is it possible? Is it just pie in the sky? That's why the accounts of the great devotees, living, breathing human beings who attain that state, that Lord Chaitanya's pastimes are so important. Because he's God, of course, but all his associates and those who followed him, they attain extraordinary states of happiness, even in this world. So that's what should enthrall us. It's something we strive for, and it just blows all this other stuff out the water. Who cares about cities? Does anyone think, I'm missing out? I'm spending all this time in the brahmacharya ashram and taking out the trash, and meanwhile I could be developing this city to get anything I want, bring it from here, and control people's minds, It's not even there. I mean, that's like, forget it. It's not. But if you're just an ordinary guy, and there's a way of developing that, you might try to do that, Or more likely, you'll try to manipulate the material energy, make a whole bunch of money, and which is a huge distraction, and puts you in the realm of sin, which assures you great suffering. We know that, right? So just being a simple brahmacharya, just doing your duty, chanting Hare Krishna, is such an auspicious position to be in. You're not incurring sin, you're burning off eons of lifetimes of other sin, and you're making progress, depending on your sincerity and determination, toward that state of true, peace and ever increasing happiness, which we know is out there, right? We know it's there. We just have to. So here he's going to go through all of these things, and it's going to culminate really in 434. Does that number ring a bell? Tadvidi pranipatena. It's a verse we should know. This is about, if you really want to understand all of these juggas, and you have to approach a bona fide spiritual master, someone who's seen the truth. That's coming up. That's one of the main verses in this chapter. All right, I've lost track of time as usual. Okay. All right, different vows, different sacrifices, and now we come to breathing. Wow, it's extra long verse here. Apane jupati pranam, prane panam tatapare, pranapanakadhirudva, pranayama padayanaha, apade niyatahara, pranan praneshu juvati. All right, before I forget, because every time we sing that song, Yashamati Nandana, I said, oh boy, we got a misspelling there. And some of the devotees are mispronouncing it. So this brought it to mind because we have the word pranayama. The name Gopi Parana Dana, that word parana it's a Bengali version of prana. So you can see that first of all there's a dot under the end, but the main thing is that the spelling is paranadana. If you notice, there's very subtle little lines over the A's. Somehow they thought that it was good that you could hardly see them, but it's also on the wrong A. It's instead of paranadana, it's paranadana. So next time we look at that, just put it on the second A. Paranadana, Gopi Paranadana. It means the wealth of the life force of the gopis. That's what the name means. All right, translation here in the Gita. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Boy, it has a special meaning in these COVID days. These people practice, and they stop all breathing voluntarily. But, they're in trance. Hare Krishna. Purport. This system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called Pranayama. And in the beginning it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. All of these processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual realization. This practice involves controlling the airs within the body so as to reverse the directions of their passage. The apana air goes downward and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized into puraka, equilibrium. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called Rechika. When both air currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in Kumbhaka Yoga. By practice of Kumbhaka Yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection and spiritual realization. The intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life without waiting for the next. For by practicing Kumbhaka Yoga, the yogis increase the duration of life by many, many years. A Krishna-conscious person, however, being always situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. His senses, being always engaged in the service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged, so at the end of life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo, I'll see you say, Mam chayo vabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samathityaitam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord transcends the modes of material nature and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. A Krishna-conscious person begins from the transcendental stage, and he is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reducing eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna prasadam, or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control. And without sense control, there's no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. So, here's another very severe and difficult practice that we don't have to worry about. I remember reading in the 4th canto. I think I was proofreading the book. This is, well, we read this already, Prithu. When Prithu finally retired, the great king retired and performed severe austerities in the forest. There's a lot of that. And one of the things he was doing was practicing pranayama. It's mentioned there. And eating, the fruits that fell, and eventually it's eating the bark or something of the tree. So Prabhupada mentions in one purport that this pranayama process is already practiced by devotees in kirtan. There's automatic regulation of the breathing when you're doing kirtan for some time. So that was a big relief. But, this is increasing the lifetime. So, one of the things that Prabhupada once said is that you have a certain number of breaths in your life, that is like planned ahead. It's already there. And so, these yogis, they slow down the breathing, or stop the breathing for some time. So they're increasing the, they still have a certain number of breaths, but we're breathing, I forget how many, maybe 60 or more times a minute, the average, adult. Then there's also the idea that if you do a lot of exercise, you're breathing hard and fast, so you're actually reducing your time. It could also be thought of that if you really get in very good physical shape, then you slow down your breathing the rest of the time. Top athletes, they breathe much slower, 40, 50 times. It's a sign of being very fit. But all of that is like, is another thing we don't have to worry about if you're just practicing Krishna consciousness. It's just like, it's many things like this in Krishna consciousness. If you're entangled in material things, then you have to really, first you have to worry about, maintaining and so forth. And if you don't want to commit sin, well, you have to find out, how to do it. There's a whole Manu Samhita and, family life and everything. So there's a lot of complications. Like the material sacrifices, they have to be done at a certain time, and everything has to be angled just right. We have this the concept of feng shui in Japanese. It's like it's there when you build a temple, even in building a temple, the orientation. So, but but on material side, there's so many things to worry about, and we know from the Bhagavatam, the mantras have to be chanted just precisely. Can you imagine if we had to chant all these mantras in perfect pronunciation? I'm sorry, Bhakta Glenn. You won't be able to stay because you're not able to practice. Or, be careful, if you chant it this way, you'll get an opposite result, and who knows what'll happen. But Krishna is Bhava Grahi Janardana. He sees the sincerity, that's what he's looking for. All right, this Bhakti Glenn, he's not going to be able to chant so well today, but that's okay, just... So, that verse, Devarshi Bhutat Rinam Patrinam, I don't know if you know that. This is that we come into this world and we're debtors. We owe the Devas, the water supply, the sun supply, the food supply, automatically. The Rishis, our teachers, wise people, you owe them, living beings in general who we depend on, Patrinam, the forefathers, the whole list. And we owe them. Devarshi Bhutatrinam Patrinam Nakinkaro, servants, Nayam Rini Charajam. Rini means a debtor. So, how to liquidate those debts? To try to do it piecemeal is impossible, really. So, but it says there, Sarvatmanagyak Sharanam Shadanyam Gato Mukundam Padidatikartam. That one is not a debtor, all these debts are liquidated. If you take shelter of someone who's taken shelter of Krishna and become a devotee, then Krishna liquidates all those debts. So that's one of the many things. You have so many things you aspire for. Just aspire for this one thing, to advance in Krishna consciousness, and everything else is taken care of. Even you'll find your material needs are met, or the greatest, one of the greatest material values in Krishna consciousness is that you find out how little you can really get on with. People are so much involved. I read this one story I happened to be reading. There's a new, they have these game boxes. A new one came out recently. I forget the company. But it was a great in demand, and people lined up in the freezing cold for hours and hours at one Walmart's, hoping to get, this new game box. And they finally got in the store the next morning, and they found out they didn't have any. They never had any. It was all distant, performing severe austerities, sacrifices for what? It's such a tragic waste. So this is like some of these inconceivable things: the breathing process and the austerities of the yogis. But what's the good? As Prabhupada would often say, what's the good of a long life? And it's right in the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, where there's no Krishna consciousness. The trees live for some 5,000 years. These redwoods up here. People travel from all over the world to see those redwoods. I don't know, some of them are getting blown down now. But it's a tragic life, really. This longevity itself is nothing. So better moments of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so where are we now? All right, it's time. So I actually brought my supply here. I wanted to read something. So this... maybe we'll make this a regular thing. Just a little selection of the verses from this chapter 35 of the 10th canto, just to get a flavor for the beauty of it. This is part of it called Yugal Geet, one of the Gopi Geets in the Bhagavad Gita. Shri Gopi Uchu. This is text 32 and text 2 and 3 of chapter 35, 10th canto. The gopis are singing. Vama baha katabama kapolo malgitam badararapata venam kormalangudibet ashitamargam gopi iriyati yatra mukunda vyomayana vanita sahasiddha vismatastu dubadaya salajja kama margana samarpata chitta krishpalammi hudapasmita nivya. The gopis said, when Mukunda vibrates the flute he has placed to his lips, stopping its holes with his tender fingers, he rests his left cheek on his left arm and makes his eyebrows dance. At that time, the demigoddesses traveling in the sky with their husbands, the Siddhas, become amazed. As those ladies listen, they are embarrassed to find their minds yielding to the pursuit of lusty desires, and in their distress, they are unaware that their belts of their garments are loosening. So I read some more commentary on this. Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that these words, Margana, what is it? Kashmalam means distress, embarrassment. So the siddhas are also embarrassed because they're sitting there with their wives and they're also getting attracted. Their minds are going to it. the conjugal, relation. What is this? We're right here with our wives. And that's good. So they're also embarrassed. And that's the first verse. We have time for one more. Just one more. Hanta chittam abalashanotedam hara hasa udasistida vidyut nandasuna nayamada jananam dharmadoya hi kujita venu vrinda shobla javashamriga gabo venu vajavita chetasa arat danta dashta kabalata takarna nidantadalikata chittam nivasam. This word danta means teeth. Danta, dental, one of those wonderful cognates. O girls, this son of Nanda who gives joy to the distressed bears steady lightning on his chest. That's the symbol of goddess of fortune. Steady lightning on his chest and has a smile like a jeweled necklace. Now please hear something wonderful. When he vibrates his flute, Braja's bulls, deer, and cows standing in groups at a great distance are all captivated by the sound, and they stop chewing the foods in their mouths and cock their ears. Stunned, they appear as if asleep or like figures in a painting. Okay, we have to stop. But Sridhar Swami says this word, what is it? Harahasa, has three meanings. The word can mean he whose smile is brilliantly clear like a jeweled necklace, or he whose smile is reflected from his jeweled necklaces because while Krishna plays the flute he bends his head down and smiles. Or the word can also mean he whose smile, like a jeweled necklace, casts its effulgence upon his chest, or he whose necklaces shine brilliantly, just like a smile. So there's 4 different ways to understand it. And with those words, we'll adjourn. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Hara